There. Perfect. Okay. Now we're ready. Took a while to get there. Had to sign into a new account and everything. So, um, okay, yeah. So asked Tanisha kind of, hey, what would maybe be myself? Because I have a few lectures or things in my back pocket, but I always want to make it useful to you guys, right? Like a good use of your time. Um, to come and participate other than get to see each other's faces and whatnot, but to hopefully continue learning and growing from um continue on what you learned and developed at the bridge. And so one of the things that I specialize in and focus a lot on in my private practice and in other lectures that I do is relationships, communication skills, relationships, those types of things. I primarily work with professionally couples. That's the main relationship dynamic that I end up working with. So I frame things a lot in terms of couples, but the skills are the same, whether it's a parent-child dynamic or whether it's a boss and or whether it's a coworker, whatever the dynamic may be. Communication skills and relationship skills are more or less the same. So, but if I talk about things in context of a relationship or a couple, it's just because that's what I work with the most. Um, okay, so um I want to change my view really quick. Um, yeah, I think I like this a little bit better. Okay. So the first thing and I thought so Tanisha was saying that like relationships with family and friends and boundaries, and that's something that's kind of still a thing that would probably be pretty useful, kind of a hot topic, things that we're still working on and figuring out, which for sure is relevant, right? You guys come to the bridge and you have these 3 weeks of life-changing experience and you walk away as a more or less different person. Obviously, you're still you, right? But then you go home to the same situation, the same, right? Like your home dynamics, if you go back to the same place that you came from, is the same, right? They had a normal 3 weeks. They just did whatever they did in their 3 weeks. They didn't necessarily have that same experience. And it's really hard to convey something like the bridge to family and friends. Like it's not something that's easy to describe or explain or whatnot. And so I think those dynamics can be pretty tricky. And then also just general, like a lot of marriage and family therapy is built around systems theory, and systems theory is basically we like homeostasis. Like systems try to stay in homeostasis, even if homeostasis is not working. Systems still try to uh, come back to that. And so a lot of times, again, as we return home or as we're trying to change things in our at home or with our relationships, there can often be a lot of pushback. And sometimes it's really tangible and we can describe it and we can explain it and can understand why it is. And sometimes it's just systems theory. It's just that because we're trying to shift things, there's this pull to try and keep things normal, which is hard on everyone kind of involved. And I don't think necessarily means anyone's bad or is wrong, but it makes it difficult to create systemic change when you've had an individual experience. Um, so focusing on that, hopefully it'll be helpful. So one of the first things I think is to talk about is boundaries. So I feel like that's a little bit of a buzzword. Like we all know boundaries are important. We all know that they're needed. Um, but what does that even mean? Or we won't be able to get into today because we're in a group dynamic, but individually, I think it's like figuring out because boundaries do very much change person to person. So what does a boundary for me look like? Or for you, right, with a specific situation. But in general, I like to cover just like what is a boundary. So this comes from Jennifer Finlayson Fife. Um, she's a doctorate marriage and family therapist, and I really like the way she describes this. She says, a boundary is a decision about who you are going to be relative to someone else's choices, not an attempt to control another person's behavior. And I think like that sums it up. So let me read it one more time for anyone who might have missed it or wants to write it down. A boundary is a decision about who you are going to be relative to someone else's choices, not an attempt to control another person's behavior. Um, so that's what I like to focus on with boundaries. I think a lot of times, and I catch myself doing it too, even in sessions sometimes. We talk about boundaries as ways to try to get somebody else to change, right? Like, oh, I need to have boundaries so that this person doesn't do this anymore, or that they start doing this. And that's not what a boundary is. We don't actually have control over people's behaviors. So a boundary is what keeps me safe, or it's what I'm going to do as in regards to whatever it is that you are or aren't going to do. So it's all about, hey, focused on me and what I can control, not trying to get somebody else to change. Um, so um, yeah, so like an example of that this is like from a long time ago when I used to work in substance abuse. But like somebody who has maybe a child that's an addict, if you're kicking them out of the home hoping that they're going to get sober, that's not a boundary. That's a manipulation technique. It's not even bad, right? Obviously we would want a child to get sober if they are struggling with addiction. But that's not the boundary. The boundary, if you're kicking somebody out of your house, the boundary is that in order to feel safe and comfortable in your own home, that you're not going to allow drugs and alcohol or whatever the substance abuse may be into your home. Does that make sense? So it's like it's the same behavior, it's the same action, but the motivation behind it is what makes it an actual boundary or trying to change someone, manipulation, coercion, whatever. And manipulation, I think, is not always bad either. I mean, therapy is essentially manipulation. So like that word isn't always a bad word. But that's when we're trying to get somebody to change, that's more of manipulation than the boundary. Any questions or any thought on this so far? Anything coming up for anyone? Okay. Um, Okay, so that's again, I like to define the boundaries. So as you're thinking about boundaries with family, with friends, with loved ones, or not so loved ones, I think that's a really helpful way to think about it. Okay, I can't control what you are or aren't going to do, but what am I going to do based on what I know about what you are likely to do or not do, right? How am I going to respond to you? That's the boundary that we're going to set in place or want to think about or want to have a good sense on. And then Brene Brown, who's my Brene Brown lovers? Anyone? I think she can somewhat be controversial. Some people don't really like her. I like her. She has a pretty good clip. It's not super long on boundaries as well. So I want to share that. So let me make sure that's pulled up on my screen over here. There. There we go. Okay. Are we hearing it okay? I paused it.
One of the most shocking findings of my work was the idea that the most compassionate people I have interviewed over the last 13 years were also the absolutely most boundaried. Because most boundary. So I'll give you a great definition of the definition of boundary that I use in the book. Boundary is simply what's okay and what's not okay. What I think we do is we don't set boundaries. We let people do things that are not okay or get away with behaviors that are not okay, then we're just resentful and hateful. Me, I'd rather be loving and generous and very straightforward with what's okay and what's not okay. And I did not, that I learned from the research. I was the exact opposite. I assumed for the first 35 years of my life that people were sucking on purpose just to piss me off. Mm-hmm. That's what I assumed. Um, that, yeah, right. Whether it was someone who worked for me or it was someone family member who was constantly like, I was always critical and judgy. And I was like, why are they choosing these things? Why are they making their choices? They should know better. And then when this thing came up from my therapist, what if people are doing the best they can? I thought my husband had the most beautiful answer to that question. He said, I'll never know whether people are doing the best they can or not. But when I assume people are, it makes my life better. So now I think I am not as sweet as I used to be, but I'm far more loving. You've got this some like technique so that you can do that. That's really like a way of being to like nurture that soil of wholeheartedness. Yeah. Generosity to assume the best about people is almost an inherently selfish act. The life you change first is your own. Love yourself. Yeah. And so my question is big, the IG. What boundaries need to be in place for me to stay in my integrity and make the most generous assumptions about you? But generosity can't exist without boundaries. And we are not comfortable setting boundaries because we care more about what people will think and we don't want to disappoint anyone. We want everyone to like us. And boundaries are not easy. Um, but I think they're the key to self love. And I think they're the key to treating others with loving kindness. Sustaining. You can't, nothing is sustainable without boundaries. I think compassion and empathy are.
Okay. So I think that that's kind of the sum of what I wanted to share. Anyone seen that before?
No.
New new clip for hope you guys. Okay, and I obviously have some thoughts I want to share. And thought any immediate thoughts from anyone that any questions or anything that really stuck out that they want to share before I keep diving into things.
I just like the part where she said it makes you less sweet but more loving. So
Yeah, right. Yep. Um, yeah, for sure. My I this is a relationship I have to work on. My little sister's
yeah.
11 years younger than me, and she's super sweet and like the world's biggest people pleaser. And I get so
Mhm.
mad at her because she tries to make everybody happy and then pisses everyone off because she can't make everyone happy.
Yeah.
But just that idea again of like um yeah, like maybe not as sweet, but more loving.
Yeah.
The thinking everybody is like doing what they can to piss me off. I laughed so hard at that because I work with middle schoolers every day. I literally think that. I'm like, are you just trying to annoy me right now? And then I have to realize like he's 12. He doesn't know how to regulate his emotions.
Uh-huh.
But I'm just like I laughed so hard at that.
Uh-huh. Totally. I connect with that too. On Sunday, we spent time with nephews, and I'm very pregnant and uncomfortable and overstimulated by noise very easily. And yeah, like I'm like, can you not just shut up? Like in my head. And then I'm like, oh yeah, they're kids. No, they can't like that's they don't need to just shut up. But like for sure, my nervous system was like, stop it. So I feel that too. Um yeah. Okay. So Brene Brown's definition, a little bit different than the one that I read, but also like she was very simple. A boundary is what is and isn't okay. And then she talks about that the most compassionate people are the most boundary because it's actually really hard to love somebody or feel compassionate towards somebody who is hurting you, right? When someone is harming us or when somebody is doing something that's not okay, yeah, of course we're not feeling compassionate. We're feeling resentful and angry and hateful towards this person, especially if it builds up over time. So a lot of times boundaries are can be hard to set. And again, we a lot of people like to use the word boundary and not actually mean boundary. They're actually trying to change somebody else. But boundaries, an actual boundary about, hey, this is what is and isn't okay with me and what I need to be safe and what I need to be okay, allows us to be more loving and compassionate. Because when I'm safe, then I can assume the best in you, right? If I'm not being harmed by you, then I can approach you with more love, curiosity, or compassion. And so that's where I think, again, like a boundary isn't about punishment or changing someone else. It's about allowing us to be compassionate. And so I liked her. I wrote it down. I like, oh, how's this gonna work? Gonna have to turn off the blur. Get to see my bedroom again. Um, I'll have to figure that out. Video. Um, okay. Um, so she talks about big is the acronym that she uses. So what boundary do I need to have to be able to stay in my integrity so I can be the most generous possible? So I like the that BIG. And again, right? Like what do I need? What is and isn't okay with me so that I can be authentic and safe and honest with myself so that I can assume the best in you, so that I can treat you in the most compassionate, loving way possible. She tells a story in one of her books about this idea of assuming the best in people. Um, it was with military, I think. She was working with like military leaders or something like that. Um, and she had them all think of, okay, who think of somebody that you just have a really hard time with, like that person that just gets under your skin, that like you just can't stand, that you are like, why are they doing what they're doing? Etc. Like think of that person and then and she uses kind of a spiritual piece to it. She asks, okay, imagine that your higher power or God or the universe or some higher power came down and told you that they were doing the best that they can, that you had it on good authority that they were doing the best that they can. And she said one of the military guys just like broke down and started crying and just like totally broke down. And she checked in and was like, "Hey, what's going on? Um, what's going on for you here?" And he says, "Every day I come into work and there's this guy John, that works under me, and I yell at John, I try and convince him how to do his job, I scream at John, I criticize John. Every day I come in and I try and move John and get John to do what he needs to be doing." And he says, "If John is really doing the best that he can, then I need to move John to a different department." And that realization was, but it was a total shift for him from being angry and resentful and frustrated to John isn't set up well to succeed in the position that he's currently in. So I really like that story because it's actually one of both compassion and also making a hard decision, right? Like John's gonna get fired or move into a different department, right? But it's not based on hating John. It's not based on whatever. It's about understanding, hey, he doesn't have the resources he needs to succeed in this position. So we need to move him to a position that he actually can succeed in, not because we hate him, but because that's what he needs. Because if he is doing the best that he can, that's what he would need there. And I think that's a good idea, again, a good again story and idea of thinking around about like boundaries, right? It's not about punishment. It's about helping us to succeed, helping us to have effective relationships. Okay. I'm going to shift into more communication skills and things like that. Any other thoughts on boundaries for anyone? Any questions or thoughts on this hot topic of boundaries?
I think a hard one for me is like when you're setting a boundary with someone, like, do you communicate that you're setting the boundary?
Really good question. And I think it
Okay.
depends. Very good question. So,
Okay.
so if you're going to try and enforce, like, if there is a consequence to if someone's behavior results in you choosing what would be a consequence to them, right? So it's like we're not giving people consequences. That's not how that works. But like, hey, if someone calls me a name, I will remove myself from the situation, right? Like that's the consequence of being name called. So I think if there is going to be a consequence that you are going to like enforce or engage, then yeah, I think it's probably worth communicating up front, right? Because trying to set a boundary in the middle of a fight
Hmm.
is not doesn't really work very well, right? In
No.
the middle of the conflict, being like, well, now I'm gonna do this, you know. But there are other situations where I don't it doesn't necessarily need to be communicated, right? Like having the conversation is probably actually going to be less helpful than more helpful. And just doing like, right? Like I worked with a client who she's working on kind of choosing what she can let go of instead of like nitpicking everything in her partner. And that's not necessarily something that she needs to communicate, right? Like she can choose to say, you know what, this is something I'm going to let go. And her work is to let it go instead of communicate, instead of say, hey, why are you doing that? Why can't you be, you know? So, really good question and totally depends, I think, on the situation.
Okay.
Yeah. And I know that's not a great answer, but I think kind of you thinking through, hey, okay, let's play it out. If I communicate it up front, what do I imagine that looking like? Is this something I can just kind of set a boundary and reinforce how I'm going to react to this situation myself without necessarily needing to communicate it? Just kind of playing both out.
I think
Um,
I took away from that, like, especially not setting the boundary when you're in the middle of a fight. Like, it's
yep.
something you visit, like, afterwards and, like, hey, to avoid this in the future,
Hmm.
I think that this is important for me or this is important for you.
Hmm.
So,
Totally. Yep. This is how I'm going to respond or react or how I want to show up to future situations that may look similar. Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Okay, love it. Any other thoughts or questions or anything for anyone else around boundaries? Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and move into some communication skills. Anyone familiar with, been trained in, had a lecture on, yeah, familiar with nonviolent communication skills? Does that ring a bell for anyone?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So maybe review for you, um, but hopefully helpful review because, yeah, sometimes I've learned things many times and I still get something new out of it. Okay, so nonviolent communication skills. I love it. I think it's a very great structured way to communicate more effectively. Obviously, there's more that goes into things. So I think the first and foremost, again, I'm thinking mostly in context of couples, but that's not always the case. Yeah, I mean it is true of other things too. The most effective way to communicate is tuning into where is our heart at. So these skills are really powerful, but if my heart's at war with somebody, right? Like if I hate them or I really don't like them or whatever, like I'm unlikely to be effective in my communication because my heart's at war. And so I'm unlikely to come to that conversation in any productive way because I don't like them, right? Or because I hate this person. So I love going over skills because I think sometimes we do just lack skills. Like sometimes I actually really do love this person and we have a good thing going, but we just lack a skill in how to communicate or whatnot. But the most important like relationship skill is like where is my heart? How do I feel towards this person? Can I find compassion where that's the boundaries come in, right? And love towards said person so that when I enter communication, I'm doing it with the intention of coming together and connecting and resolving problems versus doing it with the intention of being right or being heard or trying to change somebody. Um, so that's, I think, just want to touch on that briefly. Like, hey, these skills are really powerful. They work and they don't work when our heart's at war because one, we won't use them effectively, and two, we're not actually trying to communicate effectively. Um, so I think that's the first thing. Where's my heart at in regards to whoever the person is that I'm trying to communicate with? And can I find that softer or that more open-hearted or collaborative-hearted space? Okay, so nonviolent communication skills. Let me pull up my notes here and make sure I've got that I'm not gonna say it wrong. Um, so the first part is observation. So you just are expressing um what it is that you're wanting to talk about. So this is as if Siri and a camera are in the corner and right like they're not putting any meaning to what's happening. It's just what are the facts or what are the situations. So like when you walked into the room and sat down next to me and pulled out your phone, right? Like if my issue is that you're on your phone too much, it's right when you got on your phone and started scrolling nonstop, right? Like my tone, right? Like makes a difference. But so you're describing what's the situation. What is it that I want to talk about and describing it without putting meaning or like what I feel about it into that. So first is just when. Um Anyone, I should have thought of an example. Does anyone have, and if not, I'll think of one. Anyone have, I don't want to do like our deepest, hardest piece of relationship because, right, like that's a lot to try and do in a demo here. But anyone have like a situation where they struggle to communicate about it, that we can use as our example here?
Me and my husband just had one a little bit ago with our 2-year-old. And um, the word no, and when to use the word no with a
Okay,
child. So
gotcha. Okay, so what's your perspective on it? Like, are you the one who wants to say no more often, or are you the one who thinks that we're saying no too much?
I love the word no. I don't feel like that's a bad word.
Okay.
So
Okay. Okay.
I'm all about no pantry, no climbing in the fridge, no get off of that. You already have a broken arm. And he's
Gotcha.
more, oh, well, he's learning. And this is a part of that. So us
Hmm.
like, and there's been like it's a big thing like with parenting now. A lot of like people are like, no, no is such it's got a negative connotation to it. And I'm like, okay, but I feel like you need to understand what the word no is too.
Yeah, there's a balance there for sure. Okay, yeah, so let's see if we can plug that in here. So this would be you communicating to your husband, right? So when you are unwilling to use the word no with our son, is it a son or a daughter?
Done.
Son. Okay, right. So that's just the situation. So then the next part of nonviolent communication skills is the feelings, and most of us have probably heard this before, right? Using I feel statements, right? Those are those. What is it that
Mhm.
um how do I feel about whatever it is that's going on, right? Instead of telling somebody what they're doing or not doing or how they're making me feel, right? The simple shift of you going from you to I makes
Mm.
so much difference in communication. Like worlds of difference just being able to communicate, hey, this is what I'm experiencing versus telling somebody what they're experiencing or what they're doing. So I feel, Megan, what would be that I feel statement there for you? I'm guessing something like, I feel like we're not teaching our son the importance of what's right and wrong or what is or isn't okay,
Love it. Yep.
right? Or I feel, yeah, like if we, and then again, that's more of, so I always like to make people really tune in what is the emotion there. So it would be like, maybe I feel worried that we're not teaching him the difference between what's right and wrong or what's good or bad.
Yeah.
Um, okay, and then the next piece there is observation feelings. Um, I like to write value, but let me make sure that
Can I ask a question real quick?
yeah, of course.
When you're saying like I feel statements like that, does it negate the I feel statement if you're if you go to like I feel like you're doing this?
Yeah.
100,
Dang
right?
it.
I'm glad that you brought that up because yes, right? I feel like you're being a butthead, right? You're still using your, right? We're still telling somebody what they are or aren't doing, which may be true. You may feel like they're being a butthead, right?
Yeah.
But no, yeah, great question. The point of it is to share your perspective, right?
Yeah.
Share what's going on for you. So you could still say that, but maybe in a whole more helpful way, right? Like I feel attacked, or I feel demeaned, or I feel hurt when, right? When this happens, I feel this way, right? Because what about them? What about somebody being a butthead is making you feel that way? So when you say that, like you can still come back to, okay, well, when they're doing that, how does it actually make me feel? And
Yeah.
share that because that's usually a lot easier to receive.
Yeah. Like, I partly bring that up because I literally had an altercation yesterday with this girl at work. And looking back, I was like, well, I said this, so I don't know if it would count. But I said, like, I feel like you're attacking my work ethic when you're, like, doing this. So I'm like, I don't know if that would count or not.
Yeah, good question. Again, a lot of it probably has to do with the energy of
Yeah.
more than the words, but the only I would shift it to just saying instead of I feel like you're attacking my work ethic to like I'm feeling attacked, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And you're just taking that out. Or again, like I feel like I'm feeling like your intent here is to like put me down or you don't think that I'm working very hard or whatever. So like tell me more, right? Like that kind of
Yeah.
curious approach.
Okay.
Um yeah, great.
Thank
Glad you
you.
brought that up. Sure.
Thanks.
But yes, and I've definitely been there too. I feel like you. um, okay, so the next piece is the value and the needs. So why? Why are we feeling what we're feeling? Why do we care about whatever it is that we're caring about, right? Why are we feeling attacked? Why are we feeling frustrated or whatever? So, for Megan's example, what would be the value or the need there? Like what is it that matters to you in this situation?
I think for like this one was that we need to be consistent. Like if we're saying the word no, we need to be or I feel like if we're going to use the word no, we need to be consistent with it. Where if I don't want him in the pantry, you also can't let him in the pantry. Otherwise, he's not going to understand what the word no means or
Yeah.
what the boundary is.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just writing down why because that's like the format for you guys. But for you, Megan, again, okay. So the value there is consistency, right? Or the need. That's the thing that matters, right? And so when we're having this conversation, okay, um when we're inconsistent or when we're not on the same page about telling our son no, right? I feel worried that we are not parenting in the way that I think is the most helpful because so the why and then the because, right? You're explaining why you feel what you feel. And again, it's like I feel sad because you're a butthead, right? Again, that's what I'm going for. Um, the because is explaining your value or your need there. Because I value consistency, it's important to me that our son has that consistency in how he's being raised, right? And this is a tricky one because you guys may have different parenting ideals, and so you are going
Mhm.
to have to negotiate. But this helps
Yeah.
you explain you. Um, okay, values and needs, and then request, positive request. Again, let me make sure that I'm not totally off based on what they have here. Yeah. Um, yeah. So, and this one, man, also so powerful. Um, will you? So the left side is what the four steps of nonviolent communications are: observation, feelings, values, needs, and then positive requests. This side is like, what do I actually say, right? When I feel because will you? Is that like what am I actually saying? Excuse me. So the positive request again is so helpful because often I see this often. We come into conversations or conflict and we dump our emotions on somebody or we throw something at somebody or they do it to us, right? They tell us all about what's wrong with us or why they feel a certain way or whatever, right? And so many times we're just left with like, okay, like what do I do with that? Right? Like I don't know what you wanted from that. Do you want me to feel bad about myself? Do you want me to change? Like, are you needing like what is what do you need, right? So often that we I think we do that. We don't actually think about what's the intention of our conversation. And then it ends up going pretty poorly. So being intentional about what is it that I'm wanting out of this, right? What is my positive request? And again, a positive request, right? Not telling somebody what to do, or how to change, but making a positive request on how somebody can actually meet your need or help you align with that value, right? Um, so that one is a really powerful one too. I see it a lot in my couples therapy is that like somebody will share something pretty hard or intense or whatever, and I'm like, awesome. And what are you needing or wanting, right? What is it that you would like from this person? Sometimes the positive request is just, I want you to understand, right? It might not be an actual actionable request. It might just be, I just want to feel like you understand where I'm coming from. And that can be a positive request, right? So yeah, so that last step is positive request. So for you, Megan, right? Can we have a plan to be consistent? Or again, like I don't know if he agrees with you there, so you might have to negotiate. But
Mhm.
will you keep working with me on a parenting approach that works for both of us? Or will you say no,
Mhm.
right? When he's doing things that he doesn't, and he might be like, no, I won't do that. And then we can
Yeah.
have more of a conversation,
Yeah.
but right, asking for what it is that you kind of need there. Same
Mm.
thing, I think, for your um uh situation, Ashley, like whatever that altercation is, being able to like move into that, like, okay, like what is it that she was wanting or what is it that you were wanting in that altercation, right? Like if she's attacking your work ethic, I'm guessing she's probably wanting something there. I don't know. And that's not on you, that's on her, but that is something like, hey, if she were using this, it would have probably been helpful for her to make a positive request instead of attack your work ethic. Um, okay. Any thoughts, questions, comments? Can we see how to implement this? Do we have any questions on how to implement it? This is one of my
Yeah.
all-time favorite like tools. I share this with almost all of my couples, and it is um yeah, super, super valuable. Okay.
I'm proud of us because I think that we took your approach. So
Yay, good job.
because we
Awesome.
negotiated that, okay, I'm all about the adventure too, and he can climb and we can go downstairs and climb the back of the couch and all
Mhm.
of the stuff downstairs, but pantry is off limits. So that was my positive request, and he was like, I agree, we can do that. So,
Love it. Right? And oh, good. Because like when our hearts aren't at war and when we use health, like when we don't attack and when we use positive communication skills, we can come to solutions. Like
mhm,
that's where so many times conflict doesn't ever result in a solution because we're not trying to think of solutions, right? Because we're trying to be heard. We want the other
mhm,
person to understand what it is that we're saying, or we want them to change. And so we never actually come up with positive solutions. But when we communicate effectively, like a lot of times natural solutions will occur. Like that's awesome. What a great compromise, right?
yeah,
Like hey, yeah, our kid needs to be able to have some risk and do boy things and whatever, but the pantry feels like that one's a limit for me. And so like
We put the queen mattress on the floor on the back of the couch, and he can Superman all day long off the back of the couch onto the mattress. But so,
right. Yeah. And then again, realizing like, oh, okay, right. Like if your husband's feeling attacked, then he's probably going to be like, well, no, whatever, right? Like nobody actually cares about like we care about the pantry, obviously, but like
yeah.
when you communicate more effectively, then you can be like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, instead of shutting somebody down just because we feel attacked by them,
Mhm.
or because we feel like they don't understand or whatever. Um, so love it. Okay. Okay. I'm hitting you guys. I'm like fire hosing you with all the relationship communication skill stuff. So hopefully we're getting something. So that's a lot on the speaker end. So right when I'm sharing, when I'm the one who's the speaker, or I'm the one bringing up something or whatnot as the speaker, that's a very helpful skill, but it doesn't necessarily hit the listener side. So on the listening side, if I'm the listener, if I'm the one who's someone's bringing something to me, the acronym I like for this one is love, actually. So it's, well, lova. It's listen, understand, and then validate. That's what love stands for. Um, and then I tack on the A at the end for ask questions. Um, okay. So as the listener, listen, understand, validate, and then ask questions. So as the listener, actually listening, right? So that's an important communication skill, is am I actually willing to hold space for what someone else is sharing? Um I should have done the window of tolerance first, but we'll do it after this. So listening to actually understand. And checking in, hey, am I in a place to listen? Because what's my emotion regulation, right? Where am I at in my window of tolerance? And I'll draw that out after this if we have time. Um, because there's times when I'm not able to listen. And that happens. There's times where I'm too dysregulated. I'm too angry, I'm too frustrated, I'm too anxious, or whatever, that I don't actually care what you have to say, right? I just want to be right. Or I just want you to hear me. Like I'm not listening to what you have to say. So tuning into our own emotion regulation is super helpful there. Am I in a space to actually listen, right? And if I am, then let's actually try to listen to what it is that you have to say. If we're not in a space to listen, we need to take a break. Um, and that is totally okay. If we're in the middle of a highly intense conflict, taking a break is super valuable because you're not going to angrily argue somebody into your point of view. Has anyone ever been successful in that? Like, I haven't. I know I haven't. Occasionally, I'm not going to say never. I think sometimes that works, right? Like, you blow up big enough that somebody's like, oh, I finally get it. But generally, like, you don't angrily argue somebody into your point of view. So when we're in that headspace that we can't actually listen, it is helpful to take a break. The Gottmans recommend a 20-minute break. Um, the piece with that, though, is that you do actually have to come back. A lot of people who have an avoided attachment style, they're like, yeah, let's take a break. And then never talk about this ever again. And that's not taking a break. That's avoidant attachment, and that doesn't work either. So taking a break, but making sure we come back to the conversation. So make sure we're in a space to listen. And then the next piece is to actually understand, right? Can I see where you're coming from? Um, and this is that perspective taking piece. There was one group, I think it was this most recent group. I did a different lecture. Sorry, guys. But we did that. I showed like that perspective taking, that the dress where it's like some people see the black and gold and some people see the or black and blue and some people see the white and gold.
Yeah.
um that kind of picture that blew up on the internet a while back, or the other one is like the old lady, the old hag, and the young woman photo, where there's two images in the same photo. I can pull that one up for people. I'll do that real quick, for people who haven't seen that. Big, that's too big. Okay, then I'll share my screen. Okay, so what do you guys see? Does everyone see both? Do some people see one?
I see both.
You got both there? A lot of people can see both because I've seen it before. Anyone only see one of the two images? I already told you what's in here. There's an old
I
lady,
I only see the lady,
young woman, or the old one?
the young one. There's an old lady.
Yeah. So you see the young woman that's like looking off to the side.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, yeah. So the young woman that Gavin's seeing here, for anyone else not seeing it, this is her silhouette. So this is her jawline right here. This is her ear, this is her nose, and this is her eyelash. The old lady, this is her silhouette. So this is actually her nose. She's got a big nose here, and then she's got a mouth right here, and this is her chin. And then this is her eyeball. So her face, and she's looking kind of directly at her face takes up the whole space. So again, this is her chin, mouth, nose, and eye right here. We seeing it? Got it. Okay. Okay. So again, this is just a fun image to talk about perspective taking. That's where I was going with this. So with the understand piece here, I understand that you see a young woman, right? Maybe in that image I see the old lady, but you see the young woman. It doesn't mean that, or maybe I don't even see the image that you see, but I understand that that is an image that you see. So that's such an important relationship skill, I'd say it's the most important. Where's your heart at, and perspective taking. The ability to understand, hey, you might have a different view on this. You might interpret this situation differently than I do. And that's that understanding piece. Can I actually understand where you're coming from? Why you feel what you feel? Why you think what you think? Why you did what you did? Doesn't mean I'm okay with it. It doesn't mean that I agree. But can I understand that that's why you're doing what you're doing? So that's the understand piece. With that under there, as you're understanding, showing understanding. So reflecting back what you heard. So again, that this is also a like the I feel statements is just like that simple shift. If you can just change your language from using the word you to I, makes such a big difference. Reflecting back what you hear is a game changer for people, for communication skills. Because a lot of times we will communicate something, and maybe you're listening to me, and sometimes you can, there are times where body cues are enough, right? Head nods or eye contact or whatever lets me know that you're understanding. But if it's a tense topic, if it's something that we tend to disagree around, or we've disagreed around it in the past, or we have a hard time talking about these things, a lot of times I don't know if you're understanding me or not. So if you actually reflect back what you've heard, it lets the person actually feel understood. It lets them actually know that, hey, you're understanding what I'm saying, or you're not, right? Or I said this and you heard this, and we are on two different pages about what we're talking about here. That can be so helpful. So just repeat and reflecting back, it literally is just repeating back what you heard, right? So um we'll use Megan's example, right? Like if I'm going to reflect back to her what she said, right? Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is you had a conversation with your husband about your son and the word no, and whether or not that's appropriate and when it's appropriate, and that consistency is important to you there, right? So like I'm just telling her back what she told me. And that lets her know again that I'm actually understanding what is being shared. Again, guys, like if you take nothing else from this, try this on. Next conversation you have with somebody that matters to you and they share something with you, the first thing out of your mouth back is just repeating it back to them. Okay, so what you're saying is, or what I'm understanding is, blah, 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 right? And notice how they respond, right? If they're like, yeah, that is what I'm saying. Or again, sometimes we miss it, and it allows for clarity. It allows to be like, oh, okay, yeah, when I say the word clean, you're hearing this. You think I'm talking about dishes. When I say clean, I'm actually meaning like tidying up, right? Like we're meaning different things. So when you reflect back, it actually allows for some clarity. Um, and then validate. So this is again like as humans, so much of our healing comes from just being validated. Like that's this is a lot of therapy. Love is a lot of therapy. As a therapist, I listen, I understand where somebody's coming from, I reflect it back so somebody can hear what's going on in their head back to themselves, and then validate it, right? Like, okay, yeah, well, that makes sense. I can see why you feel that way. That's not, it's not all therapy is, and that's not the only form of healing, but I'd say 50% is like so much of healing, even my own in my own therapy, right? Like just being understood and having somebody be like, yeah, it makes sense that you would feel that way. Sometimes that allows whatever it is that we're feeling to shift and move. And then we're like, okay, well, now I'm ready to move on. I didn't actually need anything other than to just be understood. So validation is words like that makes sense. I can see where you're coming from. I understand why you're feeling that way, right? Those are all phrases that are validating phrases. Um, Here's the thing with validation too. You don't have to agree. And when I say that, I'm not saying some of my couples have been like, well, I can understand why you feel that way, but you're wrong. Right? Or I can understand why you'd feel that way, but I don't agree. And it's like, okay, that approach still isn't very helpful. So I mean it. You don't have to agree. That's not necessarily what you want to communicate. But again, just because I understand why somebody is doing what they're doing does not mean that I am condoning or agreeing with that behavior. Right? So a great example. I earlier today I had unfortunately a highly suicidal client who's really in the trenches of hopelessness and um yeah, feeling really down and out. And hopefully it's okay to talk about this. Sorry, that's suicide warning if for anyone if that is a trigger, maybe mute me for the next little bit. Um, but I can validate where he's coming from, right? Like I'm like it actually does make sense to me. I can see based on his context and what's going on in his life right now and his mental health, the depression that he deals with. Like I'm like, yeah, I can see why you feel that way. I can absolutely understand why you no longer want to be alive and why that seems like the only path out for you. It really, and I mean it. Like I do understand. It makes sense to me why he is feeling suicidal. I don't agree. I do not think that he should commit suicide. I don't agree at all that that's the path that he should take, even a little bit, right? Like it's not at all what I'm saying. But I can still validate that that's how he's feeling and that's where he's coming from, and that it makes sense for him to feel that way based on what's going on in his life. So that's an example of why I don't agree, but I can still validate that perspective or that feeling that somebody is experiencing. Um, okay. So again, you don't have to agree, but being able to say like, okay, yeah, I can see where you're coming from. That makes sense to me. I can understand your values here, whatnot. And then ask questions. So that's that last piece of just as a listener, if I'm not understanding, ask some clarifying questions, right? Or a lot of times the speaker doesn't actually know what it is that they're trying to say. That happens to me often. I like have to like talk things through a few times before I'm like, oh, what I'm actually feeling is this, right? I started talking about this, but turns out it actually ties back to this. And I realized that as I talk myself through it. So asking questions can kind of help the speaker also maybe get to what it is that they're actually trying to communicate. Um, okay, thoughts, questions on this? I'm talking a lot. What thoughts, what questions do you guys have?
So, as the listener, when you don't agree, then how do you ultimately respond?
Great. Super good question. So, I love to say this to people. The absolute best way to be heard, absolute best way to be heard is to listen. And what I mean by that is if you can validate somebody's perspective genuinely, right? Not like I was talking about with that suicidal client. Like I actually mean that. Like I do actually have compassion and empathy for where he's at. Um, so like if you can genuinely understand where somebody's coming from and they can feel that from you, they are much, much more likely to be open to what it is that you have to say. Because when we feel heard and when we feel loved and when we feel connected, we want to return that. It's like a universal human truth, just like the bad things, right? When we feel attacked, almost everyone's going to respond defensively. When we feel loved and heard and seen, we want to respond with love, hearing, and helping somebody be seen. So, really good question. It because yeah, the way I talked about it makes it sound like you just validate somebody's perspective and then shut up. No, right? Your feelings and thoughts are just as important as the other person's, but you're more likely to be heard if you lead with this. If you help them feel heard, you validate their perspective, and help them and make sure that you do, right? Asking questions. Hey, am I getting it? Am I understanding what it is that you would want me to understand? And once that person clarifies, yes, I think that you're understanding it. I think that you do understand. Then you share your side of the story, right? Say, okay, that makes sense to me. I see where you're coming from. From my perspective, I'm feeling this because of this value or this need, and then you can make your positive request there. So it's just the timing. It is still share that you have a different perspective, um, but start with understanding somebody else's first. And it's like Brene Brown says in her things, like being, what does she say? I think assuming the best in other people is inherently a selfish thing. It's the
Mhm.
same thing here. Understanding and validating and listening to somebody else is inherently selfish because you are way more likely to get what you want. You're way more likely to be heard. Um, when when we listen first, when we help somebody actually feel seen and heard. So I would say, yeah, bring up your perspective, but again, do it in a way that's like collaborative, right? Hey, if I really do understand where you're coming from, I'm going to approach it more like curiously and like let's find a solution here that works for both of us versus like no, you're wrong, I'm right, let's do it my way. Um and so I think again, where's that heart at? But yes, share your perspective, why it matters to you, and then see if we can find that common ground. Like Megan's example was great, right? Like okay, we collaborated on it and then we came up with a solution that worked for both of us. Did that answer the question, Tad? Cool. Okay. Thank you. Any and great question because that's a really important piece because you get both sides of the spectrum, right? We get the attackers, we get the withdrawers, we have all sorts
Mhm.
of types of communicators in the room, I'm sure. And so those of us who maybe tend to be people pleasers or who tend to be withdrawers are like, cool, yeah, I can listen and validate. It is important to speak up and share your perspective as well. That's just as important. So I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, any other questions or thoughts on anything we've talked about? The how to the sharers part, the nonviolent communication skills speaker part, the listener part, the love acronym, boundaries. What's with our last couple minutes? Yeah, what's coming up for you guys?
If you do have a person or you are the person who, as you mentioned, like whose heart is at war, like how do you how do you get past that piece to get to this, what you're talking about in the presentation?
Yeah. Again, really great question and really great headspace to be in. Even just being like, okay, yeah, I am at war with this person. How can I maybe move through this? Really great question. Again, such a therapist answer, but probably, but depends. But a few things that come to mind are, well, one, really understanding what it is there that like, why do you feel what you feel towards them? Maybe we need boundaries, right? Like maybe the person is consistently harming us and we need to have boundaries so we can create some safety or space there. Um, a lot of times we filter for the negative. That's just what we do. The example I share with this is I had a torn hip labrum, I don't know, 6 months to a year ago. That was just many of you who deal with physical stuff know this. Like just so painful, right? Just hurt all the time. I couldn't do the things I wanted to do. I was super limited in my physical activity, and physical activity is a huge part of my life. I like to be a very active person. I couldn't disc golf, I couldn't ski, or if I was skiing, I had to be super careful. All these things. So like constantly every day, I'm like, oh, my freaking hip, it hurts. Like anxious about it, which Tyler and Sierra helped me work through my anxiety with my hip pain. That was like life changing for me. So I'm total advocates for them. And anyways, so it's like the pain was so prevalent all the time. And then probably a month ago, I realized one day I'm like, my hip doesn't hurt. Like my hip feels really good, which is crazy because I'm pregnant. And like
Mhm.
I was actually really worried that it was going to become a big issue for me in labor and delivery and stuff. And it was like, and it's been probably a couple weeks, but I didn't wake up every morning of those weeks and being like, glory, hallelujah, my hip doesn't hurt, right? The absence of pain was nothing, where the presence of pain is super on our mind. So that's kind of a silly example, but again, like our relationships are very similar. We tend to filter for the pain. We tend to filter for what's wrong. We look for what is wrong in somebody, or our interactions with them, and don't necessarily look for what is right or what is valuable in our interactions with them. So that can be a helpful one, is to just intentionally, and that doesn't mean to negate. Again, if somebody is actively hurting us, I'm not going to be like, well, your abuser probably has some good things about them. Like, that's not what I mean, right? Like, there are certain situations where having a boundary of like pretty minimal contact is appropriate. But in general, again, if it's somebody that we love and we want to have a close relationship with, looking for the good, right? Looking for another side of the coin. If something really bothers us about somebody, is there something in why somebody's doing that, that we can appreciate in that too? That's another piece of maybe looking for the good in that person, and why we appreciate them and what they are doing well versus all the ways in which they're pissing us off. Another thought too is sometimes there's trauma there. Sometimes there's a trigger, sometimes there's something there. And so, doing therapy sits out, like, not to toot my profession, but like I know for me, that's been a huge thing. And I'm still working on it. Like, I have a pretty poor relationship with my mom. And yeah, so it's still something I'm working on, but I finally eventually was able to work through anger. And the piece for me was realizing that I wasn't really allowing for grief. I was just in anger. But I needed to do like some parts work and some stuff to get there. And it took a lot of time. It honestly did. Like, it took a while, quite a while before I was ready to move into grief instead of anger. And so, sometimes it's time. So that's a lot of different answers, but I do think that question, and if you do happen to like have a higher power or have some sort of spiritual piece, I think bringing that in is really helpful. I don't remember who it was, but somebody recently had a really cool experience with having a spiritual guide, and they were able to really tune into their spiritual guide in interactions. And but like before responding and reacting, they would kind of like tune into like, okay, spiritual guide, like, how do I want to respond and react to this? Which I thought was really cool. It was like, I think it was somebody, a loved one that had passed away. um Anyways, so that's a lot of different ideas. Did any of those land, Tad, or do you need some more ideas?
No, I mean, no, I was just curious.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Because yeah, again, depends. But the question is awesome, because if I'm ready to start looking at my own heart, that's the first step, right? Like, oh, I am at war with this person. What can I do about it? Versus, I'm at war with this person. How can I get them to change? How can I get them to become different? I still do it, but I've just learned how ineffective it is. And so I work really hard on all these skills and things and try to help other people do that, because it's what actually empowers you. It's what actually creates change, versus that constant loop of frustration of wanting or needing someone to change. And that was a big part of my stuff with my mom, is I just wanted her to change. I was so mad. I just wanted her to change. I wanted her to figure her shiz out and do her work. And so I was in this angry space for so long because I was really focused on her, um, and what she needed to do different, which was okay. I needed to be there for a while. But ultimately, looking at me and my heart and allowing myself to grieve, helps create some of the change. Okay. Oh, we're over time. Sorry. Any last thoughts or questions? Oh, I didn't,
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, just want to say thank you, really.
This was a really good one. Yeah.
oh, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Hopefully we got something out. I do think our relationships are so impactful in all aspects of our lives. So hopefully we got something. Thank you guys. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, happy. I don't know if, actually, I do think I'm on a panel before the holidays. I was going to say, if I don't see you guys before the holidays, but happy holidays anyways. But have a great rest of your night. Thank you for being here. Tanisha will be back next week to help run things, and we'll see
Thank
you
you.
guys. Have a good
All
one.
right. Good luck with
Thank
baby.
you.
See you
Yeah.
guys.
Thank you. This
Um,
was so helpful before holidays.
Yeah.
yeah. And I'll throw my email address on here for Kara. Um, .shields.mt. Okay. We'll see you guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.